All right. Gonna be freaking busy today. Might as well get started. Every damn time. There we go. Hope everybody's doing well. Like I said before, we have a busy Whip Wednesday going on tonight. I think we're gonna end up with 12 people. So be prepared that we might run a little bit over. Hey, Mr. J! Welcome, welcome. How are you doing? So yeah, like I was saying before, got a bunch of people tonight. Got some really good stuff on display though. Like I'm excited to talk about what we got on the menu tonight. For people that are new to this, right? Like this is kind of like where I kind of go through our community and what the community has been posting. And then yeah, I'm just gonna give feedback. La feedback. Oh. Wait, why is Whip Wednesday not on the Discord? What? What's happening here? Hold up, let me sort this out real quick. Okay. What about this little intermission? Hi, Kovalinsky! How are you doing? I'm just setting up like the stream because Discord kind of screwed up. I'm gonna blame Discord for this one. So from let's say 8 till 10, we'll see. We'll see how we do. Hey Dan, hey Dominic, how you both doing? We're gonna get started in just a bit. Good to see you both. Let's see. Whatever. This'll do. Just gonna do this. Okay. Cool. Hey, disclaimer! Thank you so much for the sub. Appreciate that. Alright, so let's get into it. Because it's gonna be packed. So the first one up is Vasia. Vasia is currently making a Japanese shrine in the mountains. I'm gonna, if you see me looking up at my screen, like I'm currently reading what people have been given as context, right? So I'm kind of reading through like the Discord post, and then I'm seeing what they want to get out of this session. So, created the scene mainly using Quixel assets. The focal point is in my scene is a Japanese shrine in the house built on top of the mountain. I'm looking to get feedback on the composition, lighting, and the scene overall. Okay. Oh, and then also like the snow-covered ground as well. So let's give it a look. First of all, the composition. My template here is not representative, right? Because like it's supposed to be like a little bit more like this. Let's maybe do it justice. Yeah, I think the composition is pretty good. You can definitely, with the lighting, do like a lot of really cool tricks. Because you already have some sort of like a contrast going on, right? Because the whole scene currently has this contrast between sort of like the blue purpley tones, and then you got like the light up here as well. But yeah, you can definitely push it up a little bit more. So the light, I would definitely push like the contrast between the blue versus the oranges in this case, right? So that means that the main focal point of the scene, or maybe some like some stuff over here. Like that will be orange. Or like yellowish, right? Sort of what it is right now. Maybe like a little smidge here as well. And then you kinda have these dots too. But yeah, I just want to see like a little bit on the floor, you know? I would love to see from these guys just like a little bit on the floor. And then have these lights like reflect onto the building itself so that it lights up the building a little bit more. Because again, that contrast is gonna like guide your eye towards it, right? So we're kind of having have the character, which we can also definitely use more, right? Like I would potentially even push it like a little bit further back. Right? And then we have we're kind of jumping up the stairs, right? Because we go here, we go here, we go here, and then we kind of look up towards the big thing. And for that, the thing that you're gonna want to do is you want to balance your light sources so where this composition starts to make sense and you're like leading the eye, right? So currently, what we need to change is increase the light sources, right? I would also find a way to have the character blend less than he currently does. And there's so many ways that you can do that, right? But it kind of goes with the plan for the scene of you kind of want them to see like the character first, right? So this is number 1, and then they kind of jump around on the staircase a little bit until they go up to the little building that's on the staircase. Right, you just have to make that like really distinct by using all the tools available, right? So contrast, light, shapes, silhouettes, like all those tools, like use those here to make your character stand out. Because yeah, the rest of it feels pretty good, right? We have like this solid blocking volume, which is pretty good. I kind of like to use that as well. So we're not really trying to divert anyone to there, right? Like there's nothing there that can distract us. So then we're going to be looking at this stairway that's going to lead us up to like the top of the rooftop, or like the top of the mountain, which is great, right? I think the structure of the scene at this point is already pretty good. We can just push it to the next level by increasing the lights, making sure that the character stands out. Do a bit more stuff. You were also saying composition, lighting, in the scene overall. I think honestly, like the biggest thing is just like the lights, right? Like the actual colors in the scene. You can really make them like, yeah, you can make them more intense. Everything feels like too subdued right now, and you can really play around with that. Yeah, and then making the character stand out is gonna be really nice as well. But I would definitely focus on increasing the light sources and their intensity. And then the second question was, oh wait, so yeah, we want to guide people up the staircase, which is already kind of happening, right? So, like I said, the foundations of the scene, purely based on the shapes, is already really good. But we can use lights and like other tools to make this one, like guiding people up the staircase, like way better. Then for the snow-covered ground, because that was your second question, some tips on how to make that. In your case, from what I can see, I think you already have like a pretty solid base, right? So in your case, I'm I would probably suggest to make just like snow mounds, right? So you would make like just meshes like these, right? And then you can like stack them into each other, make sure that they kind of blend nice, right? You can maybe use some tricks for that too. And I don't think that's going to be that necessary. Because it's just mainly going to be the tileable that's doing the work anyway, right? So yeah, you can kind of use the placement of the assets to kind of blend them together somewhat. But I would just go with like meshes. And then stuff like this. So that's for the floor, right? Then you could honestly, like, you could go at it pretty manually, right? Like for some of the other meshes, like if it comes to rocks, for example, like there's two ways. If you want to make it easy on yourself, manual. Then number 2 is with tessellation. So the first approach here would be to just take like the top section of your mesh, right? And then you just duplicate that out, you give it some thickness, and then you just make sure that it kind of has like the snow shader on top of it, right? Very manual thing. It depends on how many variations of meshes you have and like what kind of surface area you're trying to cover. I'm not seeing too big of an issue here. But that could work, right? Because it's easy. It's easy and it's quick. Downside, these are like pluses, right? Like relatively quick. But then the downside is that if you change anything in your scene, right? It doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility, right? So -point is flexible. If you go the tessellation route, like, it is very flexible. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, right? Because the way that you're gonna build up your tessellation shader, it's probably, well, it's gonna be a shader, right? So it's gonna be a material. And then you can control it where it only affects like the top surfaces. So no matter how you rotate stuff, like, you can make it adapt to that if you wanted to. However, the minus points are, you need to do some research on this. Tessellation kind of changed over the years. So in Unreal Engine 5, I don't even know how I would set that up myself at this point, but I'm assuming that it's not going to be too complicated. So yeah, like, these are just like the 3 options that I want to give you. Depending on your timeline and what you're most comfortable with, like, technically, those are like the options that I would give. Yeah, like I said, solid foundations, right? Yeah, solid foundations. And yeah, I mean, all the stuff that we said is only going to make this better, I think. What you could try, and this is something that you have to try, right? Because now, talking about the composition a little bit more, right? Is your central point is kind of like in the middle, right? What I would suggest that you try is try to push it a little bit more towards the edge, so that you have like a giant cliff here, and then you have like the staircase going up, and then you have the cliff at the side here. Yeah, that's what I would try. That you, because it's a rule of thirds, right? Like, it's pretty simply, you just divide like your frame into like 3 equal parts. And then you try to put your focal point around like one of these points where like 2 of the lines converge, right? That's the way that I'm looking at it. Because right now, by putting it in the middle, it kind of feels like awkward to me. If you can push that a little bit more to the side. You could also try the left side, by the way, right? I'm thinking that the right side, it's kind of weird because it might also not work, because I feel that it pushes like the whole thing out of off balance as well. That's why I'm kind of hesitant. But I think you should try it. Should always give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then you can always revert, right? You just duplicate like the camera. Play around with it a little bit more. Yeah, no. Great stuff. Great stuff, Asia. Thank you for sharing your work as well. Like I said before, like, really solid foundations, right? So yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious what you're gonna do with it. Minor point. But this is slightly annoying, right? Because I'm gonna infuse logic in what is otherwise like an artistically well done scene at this point already. We're at the tree line, right? Like we're at the point where there's snow on the mountain. Usually there's not gonna be too many trees there. No equals no trees. Try to kind of come in with logic here, but yeah. And definitely not like these trees that are more stereotypical for like the summer, right? I know why they're there, because they look good. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for sharing your work. Gonna be moving on to the next one, which is gonna be Guy. So we're gonna switch on over to Guy over here. Yeah, so thanks again for posting your work, Kovalinsky. Thank you so much. Now, Guy, we're doing some other hard surface stuffy here, right? This is not my wheelhouse. Take that into account, as always. I did try to go in and like provide you with like some really quick things that we could possibly look at together, right? So so yeah, let me read the thread because I think someone was given good feedback already. Yeah, so Tim is in there. He's saying super cool already, and the only thing that you might want to have a look at is the frequency of your details, right? And I totally agree with Tim here. This was also the thing that I was gonna bring up. Like, it kind of goes into like the stereotypical like sci-fi trap where you just add details because details look cool. But actually, details only look cool because they are, in my opinion... so wait, where do we put this? Okay, so... cool details. They are logical, right? They kind of make sense. And they are spread out as well. Because if we're just gonna add like random things onto a mesh, in some cases it works, right? I'm not gonna say that every hard surface model out there has like perfect sense whenever they're putting stuff on their model. But like, try to keep it as logical as possible, right? So for example, that could be, okay, if this is like the engine bay, right? Then let's imagine that this is the engine. Then we would see more vents, more, maybe like a line for a hatch where we can like open the engine, right? Because we're doing some maintenance towards it. Right? All that kind of stuff. And then on the opposite side, like these kind of random bolts, like on the legs, right? Let's look at this part now. They don't really make sense, right? So they're just like random details, because and I'm making an assumption here, is because you felt that the area was too clean, so you just like slapped some random stuff on here. But it doesn't really make sense if there's nothing there for those details to make sense on it, right? So everything just feels like too random. And that's why I added this picture over here, right? So this is the work from Ben Bolton. So Ben Bolton, go look him up. And Ben Bolton is like a hard surface concept designer, right? Whenever I'm looking for inspiration for whenever I'm looking for inspiration when it comes to like hard surface details, right? I mean, barely go look for it because I'm not a hard surface guy, right? But I tend to look at like concept designers that focus on this stuff, right? Because usually what is kind of lacking from the games element is like a thorough understanding of the design principles that usually go into this work, right? So what I'm talking about is, I mean, this is all the same thing. But like not everything on here is like super noisy, right? It's very deliberately picked out to have certain bits of noise that kind of makes sense for the object. And then the rest of the areas are kind of like areas for rest, right? Because your details, they only stand out as details if they have like a contrast of an area of rest. Does that make sense? Because if everything is going to be noisy, then nothing is noisy. So you have to be like very careful on how much noise you put on something. Because if we just look at like the overall thing here, right? It is too much. For example, I'll bring up like another example here, right? The hand like barely stands out between like all the noise here because you have like all these intricate details over here and like over here, like over here. So it starts to blend together. Whereas like for certain paneling, you can just leave those blank, right? So then you create like a balance between, for example, this main panel, right? Which has nothing really on it. And then you could go underneath the panel where it's like assembled to like the frame. You could add more detail onto that part, right? So you would leave this blank and then put the details on like the interesting parts, like the joints or like moving pieces or like things where where things have been fastened, right? Or like bolted into something where it makes sense, right? So for example, these guys, right? Like it would probably feel like really natural if you have them like floating a little bit and then they would have like a bolt here because that's how they would be like attached to the main thing. But yeah, some of the other stuff can definitely be refined. So I would honestly recommend to look at doing something like this stuff yourself as well. Like doing these like smaller exercises where you can only focus on the shapes and like the density of the shapes and all that stuff. So there's a common rule, right? Like the 80-20 rule, which gets brought up a lot. It's like 80% rest, 20% details. Would be very handy. But I would do like design. I would design like small stuff, you know? And like look at and analyze like real world design and how they do things. Something that could be cool to make was making each leg have something unique going on that could distinguish them. Well, if it was designed again, right? Because it comes back to the same principles of if you add like something unique on each leg, then no leg is unique anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that you're kind of going with like a Mr. Handy kind of thing, right? Where it has like 3 arms and like they all do something separately. But it would, imagine if we would do that here, like it would make this convoluted design at this point like even noisier than it already is. So we have to go the opposite way, like simplifying rather than adding stuff to it. Let's see. So yeah, that was something that Tim brought up. I just wanted to elaborate on that as well. Thank you so much for sharing that, by the way, Tim. Removing some of the details, that's a good suggestion as well. And then especially being careful about like how often you use the same decal. That's also a good point from Tim. Yep. The 7-hole one especially. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And guy said, I ran out of decals to use in some of the empty spaces. Don't do that. Like, leave empty space because it's going to make the details like stand out more. Super important. And this is going to be like a thing that I'm going to be talking about like in other people's work today as well. So this is going to be like a recurring thing. Back to guy was saying, yeah, just one general feedback on its textures and potential additions. I honestly think that there is some work to be done on the textures, right? But I'm not going to speak too much about the texturing because I think actually going towards the fundamentals and like focusing on like visual clarity before we speak about the textures, right? Because this is also another thing where I would probably push for like a little bit more grunge and like a little bit more of, because it is like a heavy mechanical thing, right? Like, so I would push like for more dirt and like more grunge, but that doesn't work in the current state of this prop because it's already so noisy. So if we then add like another layer of noise on it, it's not going to look good. So what I would do, right? So for the texturing, right? Step 1 is clean up the decals. Look at references. Really look at how to break things down into the real world and how they distribute the amount of details compared to the areas of rest. Like you can see this in everything, right? Like you can look at design from like everyday things to like cars, right? Look at how those are designed. For your what could be good for your use case? I mean, you could look at tanks, right? I think tanks are going to be pretty relevant. And use, okay, sorry, real life for this. So look at tanks, etc., right? And really try to see like what the distribution is between like the density here. Also look at some of the stuff that Ben Bolton does, right? Like Ben Bolton has like a ton more stuff that is really interesting to look at. And there's other concept designers out there too. And then I would think about the texturing. Right? So first clean up the decals, look at references, and kind of do like another round of like decal work, right? And then jump into the texturing once you've done that. I know I'm kind of all over the place with this list, but hey. Yeah. And then also the last thing that I wanted to add here as like a quick remark. Pilgrim, like Art of Pilgrim on YouTube, did like a really great tutorial on how to present your work as well. This is going to be super useful, especially once you did like a texturing pass, because textures work hand in hand with how you present stuff, with how you present assets and how you light them. So look at that too. It's a great little tutorial there. Because yeah, texturing. So textures love lighting. Okay, guy. Best of luck. And yeah. And if you need my help, tag me again. How are we doing this? Oh, next up is Joe Edwards. Where's Joe? Where is Joe? I don't have Joe in here. Hold up. Hold up a minute. I thought I had you in. Oh? Did, okay. So skipped you then. Sorry, let me just like get this set up. Like, I think we talked about this like a while ago. Okay. Let's get Joe's stuff set up. I don't know who the concept is from. Let me have a quick look. Oh, a concept from Fabian Albert. Okay. That's awesome. Thanks for including that in there, Joe. Okay, so what does Joe want our help on? Okay, pretty generic question here. Let me know if there's any feedback. We're just gonna have a quick look at it then. I like the rendering style. Like, the render itself looks really good already. What? Is that an artifact? It's a weird one. Oh, come on. Keep misclicking. Yeah. This stuff up in the air. What is that? I would have a look at the clouds here. They kind of feel like a little bit too procedural, right? Like, you can really feel like the noise coming through them. Like, the noise is almost too small, like the noise scale. Makes them feel like super fake. What program is this? The program that I'm doing the overpaint in, you mean? Or... Oh, Henrik, sorry, I skipped your message. And use the color to focus more on the yellow one? Yellow one? Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. Yeah, this is Affinity Photo that I'm using. Yeah, not too much to say on this. It looks great. I would definitely add more variation. Like, up and down variation, right? Possibly do the same thing in the fences as well, I would say. Because I think I think what my quote unquote issue is that it feels like really boxy and like really sterile, right? Especially the watchtower itself, right? And I think you could do with like a couple of touches of just being like, oh, maybe like one of these slats like comes up, right? And like maybe one of these bars is like slightly crooked. Very subtle stuff, right? It doesn't have to be as exaggerated as I'm doing it right now. Yeah, just give the idea that this has seen some like wear and tear through the times, right? Because yeah, it just feels like really, really sterile at the moment, or like too straight. Hey, sorry, how's it going? Sorry, I'm late. Yeah, no worries, no worries. You're all good. We were just talking about how it feels sterile. Like it feels too 3D-ish, you know? And that's because like there's not enough like little kinks that kind of like help you like embed the illusion that this is like a real thing, right? It's like little sections like this where like the roof panels are like slightly coming up. Or like on the silhouette especially, right? Where like a guy came in and like did some repairs, but like he kind of did a shitty job at it, so like the imperfections that make it look like it's built by humans. It just needs more imperfections. And then yeah, we talked about the clouds a little bit as well, like the clouds. Cloud noise is too high. Like the scale of it, right? So that you can see like these. It's like little fluff, right? That's what we're getting right now. Then yeah. I also don't know what this is. I think this is supposed to be replaced at some point by like volumetric sky streaks or something like that, right? Like what are they called? No chemtrails. Maybe they are, but yeah, like airplane lines. Yeah. Maybe some red sand dust on the roof or something else. I think that could be cool. Yeah, like just like a slight caking of like red dust, you know, on everything. Slightly, right? Where you have like the cameras that are covered in like a slight layer of dust. And maybe there's like some red dust buildup along these edges. Could be great. And then yeah, kind of like you're doing here already, right? Like we have like almost like a gradient. If it isn't Real Engine, there's a free cloud pack in Skies pack that might work. That's interesting. There's also like the built-in tool for volumetric clouds, which may be what you're using now. I'm not sure how you got this though with that tool. Yeah. Like that's a great idea. Red sand caking everything. Yeah, ever so slightly, right? Like a slight layer. Yeah. The rest of it looks good though. I like it. I like it a lot. Oh, ultra dynamic sky? Yeah. You can easily reduce that. Like, I don't know how it works in ultra dynamic sky, but you can probably just like reduce like the noise parameter inside of the material, right? Like the noise density scale or whatever. Yeah. No, this is great. It's good to see you back, Joe. Hope everything is going well. Yeah, but thanks for showing your work. We gotta move on though, because there are like a lot of people still waiting, and this is gonna be like a busy session, so it's good to see you back. Promise I will finish this one. Okay, I'll keep you to that promise. Next up, we got Sean. Oh god, Sean coming in with a gun. Sean, why do you do this to me? Thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. No worries. Happy to help. Okay, so here I currently have it in Marmoset with some basic overall lighting, which is also whip. If there's anything you could think that could be improved about the textures or quality, any additions, changes. It's just anything. I'm not gonna talk too much about the textures, honestly. Like, this is not my wheelhouse. I think, honestly, like Senkai, who was sharing like feedback before, has honestly done like an awesome job, like explaining like how you can like really push the textures to the next level, providing like awesome examples like this, which is freaking great. Like, this is a great picture. Well, like a render. Just like a great reference to stick by, right? Yeah, I think I agree with what Senkai is saying. Just like make them look like really worn, you know? Like subtle variations in like the wear and damage. It's gonna look really nice. I don't know. I don't think it is an M1. It's supposed to be a Ross Rifle MK3. I know nothing about guns. So, yeah. But I wanted to suggest, Sean, there is, might have seen this one already, but like this little tutorial here by Jason Ord is great if you're looking to level up your presentation, especially when it comes to guns, because that's the thing that I think could make like the biggest impact, right? So first of all, we just gonna shout out Senkai here, because that was a really solid feedback. Then number 2 is the presentation, right? Like the lighting, especially. It's going to be really important, because this is what I was saying before, right? Like in one of the previous people that we looked at today, is that lighting and the textures, they kind of go hand in hand. So you kind of need to level up both of them at the same time. And I think what could help is if you like really try to push your lighting to like the next stage, right? Because you said that it was like very whip. So I would try to push the lighting to like the next stage, and then do like another round of texturing, and then go back to the lighting, and then kind of like incrementally between the two, increase the quality of them, right? Yeah, like this example is great. Yeah, what could also help is become like pretty stereotypical now, right? But like the light background, I think it always helps, because especially when working with ray tracing and all of that, right? Like it's gonna capture like more brighter values, which always shows better when it comes to your materials. So I'll say, Brighter environment. I would look like into product design for the presentation. Yeah, I think that's a good shout. Like, this is something that I also recommend to a lot of people too, is whenever you're doing some sort of vehicle, look into like how car studios do their presentations, right? The same can definitely be learned from product design, right? Or like product photography. Because they must have some like really interesting studio setups that you could probably learn a lot from as well. I remember seeing that tutorial and following it. Maybe I should go back. I missed some things. Yeah. I think also, especially when we look at this thing, well, this image over here, look at like the color variation that we're getting on specifically the metal, right? Like subtle browns, and then you kind of have like I mean, it's overall like it has like a lot of brown influences, you know, when it comes to the metal, compared to where you're going for like a more traditional like gunmetal black look. This is really interesting. I mean, obviously, look at references, see what you like the most, and go for that, right? Yeah, it makes it stand out more compared to like other guns that I've seen. But yeah, I would definitely go back to that tutorial as well, for sure. Yeah, not too much more to add. I think it is really... This is the thing with guns in general, right? Or like with weapons especially. I think weapons, they really need to shine when it comes to like their ultra specific detail on the gun itself. That's where you have to pay attention to like all the little layers that they have, right? Like little scratches, little wear marks, like little oil stains, like all that kind of stuff is gonna have an impact. And it's all gonna leave like a different kind of like discoloration or leave its traces in different ways, right? So yeah. With this stuff, you have to dive deep. Like really look at like these awkward like these hidden blogs, right, where like there's like gun nerds talking about like how to maintain guns and what they do with it, and they get like sometimes they get like really specific with the photos that they share as well, so that you can see them like ripped apart and like what they're doing to combat like certain things. Like really learn about it, right? Like really take that to heart and take that texturing to the next level. Because I feel like, honestly, from all the specializations out there, weapons are the most detail focused from all of them. So yeah, you gotta make those details shine. I would say, I'll add a caveat to that, right? Because if you don't necessarily want to become a weapon artist, I mean, this kind of opens up like a bigger question, right? Like, because then we can ask like, why do a weapon at all? But I'll stick with it, right? So, because if you want to become like a weapon artist, you have to implement those details. I would say if your interest in more into the prop realms, right? And you just wanted to do something hard surfacey, then I think you can put in like less details, in my opinion. But yeah. You still want to make it look as good as you can, so. Alright, no. Keep pushing it, Sean. Keep pushing it. And yeah, like really have like the lighting work hand in hand. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Weapons are very detail oriented, so I'm working on getting more detail focused and applying that to my art. Okay. So a question then, do you want to become like a weapon artist? Was that the goal with this? I mean, not with this single weapon, right? But like in general. Then we move on to the next person. Let's have a look. Need to grab a little bit of water though before. More of a test, to be honest. Never really did a weapon to this extent. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, definitely give it your best shot, right? But, okay, I'll speak from my experience, right? If I did this as a test, I would guaranteed get to the point where I'm like, oh my god. Like, if I really wanted to make this at the level of like a weapon artist, I would need to push it so much further, and I don't want to. Not to be discouraging, right? But that's just like the reality of someone who doesn't want to focus on small details. Feedback, please. Yeah, we're doing a whole bunch of it. For that though, need to grab some water. Be right back. All right. Let's move on up to the next one, which is Alan. Where's Alan in the list? Maybe I should close the ones that I've already done. Vasia. Is Alan not in the list either? I keep missing people. What the hell's happening? Product design and lighting to presentation will let it shine. Yeah! 100%. 100%. This is what I'm saying, right? Like, we usually, especially in the beginning, we skip on that part where we kind of rush through, like, the presentation part. But we shouldn't. We really shouldn't, because it's so important. Yeah, don't know why I closed you. Okay. Okay. What do we have here? Alan. So this is a group project. And that seems to be like a reoccurring thing for you, right, Alan? I think we only review like group project. Oh no, that's not true. No, that's not true. You had like the pillar as well. Never mind. Let's have a look here. As far for the feedback we would love to receive, I would like general feedback for the project. Come on, man! You even say that you don't like? You know that like I don't like to give like general feedback? Come on, man! Some more of the pressing things. Working with POM and the swimming issues that can pop up. Issues on the composition outside of the current one. Oh, ideas, sorry. Ideas for the composition outside of the current one. Where you think the priority should be as far as steps forward? Okay. So honestly, like the composition, right? Like that seemed to be set in stone from the beginning. So I wouldn't bother changing that now. Because your whole scene is kind of built towards the composition that you have here, right? So at this point, I would probably not touch the composition. Because you can't really do that much when it comes to a composition that's built around like a single vanishing point, right? So I would honestly just keep focusing on what you guys have here and just execute it, right? I think what you could try is play around with the FOV and also the scale of the buildings as well, right? We'll dive into that a little bit. So yeah, and also no composition changes because it's mean, it's not late in the process, right? But you would probably have to build like a whole bunch of other stuff to make another composition work. So yeah, I would just dedicate to that. And then once you did this one scene, right? Then you can explore like other ones outside of it. That'll be my recommendation. What I was thinking was more like detail shots. Yeah. But no, don't do it. Because that will take resources away from like your main composition shot, right? And you were already, when we were talking about it in like the voice chat on our community, you were already saying that you were running into issues where like, hey, can we use like asset packages because we don't have a vehicle artist? So it sounds like a resource restriction already. So I would not do that. I would first build out like this scene, because this scene is going to encompass like a lot of the things that you would need for building other scenes as well, right? So it's going to take a little bit more time up front, but I think what might happen is that once you start building this scene, then you can kind of build like other scenes out of it with like some additional assets, right? But it's not going to be like building a scene from scratch. Some of the, so yeah, we kind of talked about like the composition, right? Priority steps forward. I think, yeah, that's what we talked about as well, right? Just like keeping on, I would say. In terms of like more granular priorities, I will say that focus on the biggest stuff, right? Probably makes the most sense. So you want to focus on big to small. Now, what is big in here? The road surface is covering like a lot of ground, right? Like a lot of the frame is covered by the roads. And currently, nothing has happened on here just yet. We got the base there, right? But like we want some additional stuff here. So I would definitely say like the road, right? And then you want snow. Because that is crucial, right? Like the snow. I would even say that this is like probably above this one. Yeah, like definitely the snow. The roads need to be like done properly. Buildings, right? But I think the priority is probably gonna be, let's make a list out of this. Snow, number 1. Okay. The road number 2, and this is gonna be weird, right? You're like, what the fuck? Road number 2? Why? I think my argument for that would be because if you look at the frame, right, and if you're gonna go for like the same sort of lighting setup, you could potentially get away with the buildings looking pretty basic because the focus is gonna be all on the roads, on the road surface in this scene. So that's why I'm saying roads before buildings, right? Because that's where a lot of the detail is gonna happen. Like a building, they're already at a pretty good stage, right? Like especially this one right here seems to be developing like really quickly, but the road is just like still quite basic. So yeah, definitely focus on the snow for covering that up. Let's see. One of the more pressing things working with Palm and the swimming issues that can pop up. Yeah, get back to me once they do. I think that's going to be like more productive, right? Because I can name like a whole list of potential issues, but yeah. enjoy game development, baby, because this is where like issues crop up and you have to like resolve them on the fly. Oh, Blender. I've got no idea because the link is not there. So usually we focus on people from the actual community. So, and we don't really focus on portfolios. Not at least for this one. We have like one portfolio review a month. But yeah. Let's get back into this though. So the last thing that I want to bring up is look at the scale of everything, right? Look at like how dominant this stuff is. Like you kind of need to like visually impress people, right? Like these buildings in the back, they have like a really imposing kind of feel, like they're really tall. Compared to like the more modest sized buildings that you have here, right? Like it has to do with the mood, right? Sorry, I got distracted. I just thought of something else. But yeah. Main point here is proportions and scale of buildings, right? In relevance to the mood that you're trying to sell. This is actually what I wanted to add here as well, is stuff that has to do with the mood. So like snow, volumetrics, like all that kind of stuff. That is going to be pretty high priority here as well. Yeah, your current buildings, especially the background ones, right? They're pretty modest in comparison. Just scale them up, right? A lot of this stuff has to do with like how you feel about the mood, right? So that's why I focus on like how imposing the buildings feel in the concept, because they kind of feel like they're just like giant shadows of buildings rather than actual buildings. It could almost be like, in a way, it kind of has like a very creepy vibe to it, right? Where you see like a building like in the fog in the distance, it kind of has this like really eerie, like moody vibe to it. And trying to nail that, right, it's gonna be a big one. So yeah, hope that helped, Alan. I hope that helped. Yeah, but if you got some more specific feedback, like tag me again for next week, right? Love to help out. Yeah, I'll definitely, last bit here, I'll definitely put like an exclamation mark here for the mood. It's really important. Because that's what, this image is all meant to make you feel something, right? And that's what you need to get to with your environment too. All right. Thanks for sharing, Alan. And thanks for all the other people involved in the team as well. Got a decent amount of people on it. It's awesome. Thank you very much. No worries. Happy to help. Who is next? We got Nian. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Welcome to the community, by the way. It's awesome to see you here. Where's Nian? There you go. And Nian is currently working on a Witcher 3 inspired scene. You too, buddy! Oh, shit. What did I do? Okay, so hello there. I'm currently working on a project for my portfolio. I'm trying to recreate and enhance the location from The Witcher 3. Okay, so the scene is still in its early stages, so I'm looking for composition and proportions. Okay, composition and proportions. So this is the original scene that we have over here. Okay. So I've got an interesting question for you then. Like, first question is, enhance the scene. What does that mean? Because the reason why I'm asking this question is because it would be good for you to like self-reflect on what that means to you, right? Because you could say like, oh, I'm giving it like a graphical fidelity boost as well. But I think it could also be interesting to see what else you could do to the scene to push it to the next level, right? So for example, right? So if we stick with like enhancing the scene, it is pretty unclear what happened here, right? So it could be nice to have like these sort of tracks going off to the side, having like more stuff on the side that's kind of like partially buried, and then you could have like these corpses next to it, right? But I would honestly say that you can do that, right? And that would give you like a solid basis for what the scene could be. But I would honestly think about like, what is a story that you're trying to tell here? Hey, come on! Thank you so much for the love, man. So yeah, like I would really think about like the story that you're trying to tell here. Because like looking at The Witcher 3, it's an older game, right? Like the story here is not as visually well thought out as is probably displayed in the game, right? So I would really think about like what you can add on a storytelling factor. Right? So what do you want to tell? Because you also have to look at it this way, right? Like The Witcher, this is probably just like a little thing on the side that someone spent like a little bit of time on, but it's probably not that relevant to anything. But what you have to do is you're distilling that into like a single portfolio piece, right? So you have to do more work to make it stand more on its own 2 feet compared to the game, right? Because the game is all about the big picture, but you're focusing on it with like a microscope. So that means that you have to do more storytelling. You have to pay attention to like the details, all that kind of stuff. And with that being said, I think because you mentioned that this is also your first big environment, I'm gonna say this right now just to protect you from yourself. Scrap this one. It has no relevance to the scene. I think this scene has like a lot of interesting potential. Don't do 2 scenes, please. Not not as like a first first environment. Like really try to condense it, because just doing this scene really well is gonna take a lot of mental power already, right? I also don't want to scare you into not doing it, but this is already gonna take a lot of work if you really want to nail like all the things that are involved with it. Because if we're gonna focus on the storytelling, right? Like the reason why we focus on storytelling is because the storytelling is gonna is going to inform us on what we need to build, right? Like we can figure out assets, and we can tweak our materials. And then we can blah blah blah. You know, like the story is like our foundation to like everything. So yeah, really try to look at it that way, right? Like everything comes from that story. Because let's say, for example, let's do like 2 examples here, right? So story number 1 is an accident. Story number 2 is an ambush. These 2 things are going to have like a drastically different impact on what you're going to see at the site, right? Because an ambush is probably going to lead to a fight, and the fight is probably going to end up with casualties, right? Where like an accident could be like, oh shit, we lost our wheel, so now we need to go to the city and get a wheel. Dang it, like that sucks. So that's why I'm just a simple example, right? Just think about the story first. Really try to ask yourself, like, okay, like if I'm riding from one town to the next town and like this happened to me, like what are the consequences of this? What are the things that I'm carrying inside of like our trailer? Like how many horses did I have? Like how many people were with me? Like all that kind of stuff, right? Are gonna impact the story. But what I will say, just to come back to like the just do one scene angle for a second, is what you could do, right? And this is something that I recommend is, or like potentially recommend if you still want to keep working on it, right? Let's say this scene is done, looks really good. Then you can build like an additional scene based in the same kind of universe with like the same kind of assets, right? But I can almost guarantee you, if this is your first big environment, you're not going to do that. You're just going to stick with the one thing. Yeah. So yeah, storytelling, super important here. Let's see, composition and proportions. I think let's keep it to the fundamentals for now, and then later we can talk about like the composition. Well, I'll give you one thing though. Like what's gonna be really important here? Let's see. Trying to condense it a little bit, right? The main tools that I would be using in this composition is leading lines, because they're going to be baked into the scene, which is going to be great for us. And with that, I mean these things, right? Where you have like, oh, they derailed from the path. You can use that as like a tool to guide people towards what you want them to look at, right? And then you could do like footsteps and all that kind of stuff with it too. But yeah, like that is going to be like a major thing here, right? Like leading lines. Going to be great for us. Next thing that I'll bring up is blocking volumes. This is what I call them, right? But it's basically a way to like stop you from looking anywhere else. So we need to sort of separate the space where we want to tell a story in from the space that is not relevant to the story in some way. You can see a really good display of that here, right? Like these trees are there to kind of block you from like looking anywhere further, right? And that's also why this space is open, because they kind of want you to look at like the section here, right? Because it's a landmark. But the rest of it, again, is made out of, like, blocking volumes, right? That's the way, like, if we really look at, like, the breakdown of a scene, that's what they're trying to do. Like, they're trying to separate the story where you want to be looking, or, like, rather where they want you to be looking, from the space that is not relevant to the story that they're trying to convey. Right? Whereas there is still, like, a lot of open stuff here which can be distracting to your composition. So those two things I will leave here. Think about those two things, because they're going to be, like, really relevant for the scene that you're building. Then it's coming in and he says, I see the story like this. It was a battlefield where two armies fought and a merchant drove past and became a casualty of the conflict. Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to have, like, another impact on the assets that we're going to have to build for the scene, right? Because then the main question is, like, okay, cool. What makes a merchant unique, right? So a merchant is probably going to sell goods. What kind of goods was he selling? Right? And how can we visually, and this is going to be an interesting part, right? With your story, how can we visualize that this was a battlefield, right? Because it's probably gonna, if we think, I don't know what the area called. Like, it's too long since I played, like, The Witcher 3. But I think where the Nilfgaard army came in, right? There's, like, a whole battlefield and, like, people on stakes and all that kind of stuff. We have to build, like, assets around that too, right? So we have, like, two core components, which is, like, okay, merchant and battlefield. And then we can kind of see what we need to build towards those keywords to make it visually come across the screen as well. Because it gets really tricky sometimes where sometimes we try to add too many things, right? And it makes the whole picture, like, really blurry and confusing. So sometimes you just have to simplify everything. Smoke in the background could be nice, but that's more like an additional thing, right? Because you could put smoke in the background and someone's maybe just, like, lighting a bonfire or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, you can really, like, go into the weeds with this, right? But, like, you need to focus on the bigger picture first and then break it down into what you need, right? Yeah, Henrik, that's great. But that also runs into it, like, its own issue, right? Especially for us environment artists. Well, I'll speak for myself. We generally don't like to do injured people, right? So either we have a couple of options there, right? Like, either we look for an asset package that has, like, injured people, or we collaborate with, like, a character artist potentially, but that's going to add, like, its own issues. Or we find a visual that can replace the injured people, right? Or we put them in such a place where it doesn't become clear, where the distance can basically cause you to, like, confuse what is happening, right? So what you could do in this case is you could get, like, a guy from, like, an asset package, and it could look like nothing like an injured guy, but if you put them far away and into, like, a weird position, you could kind of make it look like a silhouette of, like, someone who's just lying on the ground. You could get away with that as long as you put them far enough, right? But yeah, we're getting into the weeds. I would, for now, definitely keep it, like, focused on those two main things, right? And then also I'll add, like, another one, like the rule of thirds, right? Because that's just, like, a core rule where you divide your frame up into 3 equal parts each way, and then you try to put, like, your focal points on the junctions of those two. That can be like a really good base. But yeah, that's what I would do. Focus on those 3 things, and that's going to help you a lot when it comes to your composition. Yeah, please, please. I'm being really, really upfront about it, but only do 1 scene. Don't even think about doing anything else. Just get the 1 camera angle and really try to nail it. Set yourself up for success. All right. Next up, we are going to go to the gate from Thomas. Where are you, Thomas? There you are. Okay, cool. I think to publish my scene soon, it's possible to have some feedback about my lighting. Yeah, sure. From all the iterations that I've seen, I really like what you've done with the lighting. Like, honestly, it's looking quite nice. It kind of has that like dreamy atmosphere, right? Oh, Den, was that you that we were giving feedback? I didn't make the link. I thought you were just coming up with like a random story suggestion. Okay, no worries. Happy to help. Yeah, so Thomas, yeah, I do really like the lighting, honestly. I really do. Maybe like if we focus on like the smaller stuff, right? Is the intensity of the candles? Maybe slightly too intense? Like, I think you could easily turn that down by half. Because now it feels like they're like pretty bright, right? Where like a candlelight is usually like pretty small. So I would like turn them down like by 50%. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, if you're getting ready to post, then I'm gonna keep it like short and sweet. What I did wanted to bring up though is this is also like a final presentation thing, right? Be aware of how much you're cropping the image. Like you gotta really be aware of that, because we have this image over here, right? And if I go to my cropping tool, just to give you like a visual example. Right, like the focal point that we wanna showcase is a sword, right? But it feels like it's like pushed all the way down to like the bottom of the screen. And it kind of feels like pretty awkward. I think an easy solution for this one could actually be where you just take like the camera back, right? And you just take the camera just a little bit back so that you get like a little bit of a lead up of the stairs. And then you have like the bottom section, like the bottom line of the rule of thirds, that is kind of used as like a measuring point for where the sword should be, right? Something like that. Because you're kind of doing it like really great in this one, right? It kind of feels like a really nicely balanced image. And just to give you an example of what that could mean, right, in comparison. Like we have the top one here, which is like the original. And this one is one where it kind of intentionally cropped it in a way where you cropped the image on the left here. Right, just to give you like a visual comparison. And you can kind of see that it kind of feels awkward, right, when we don't have that lead up anymore. So that's the thing that we just need to implement here as well. Like a little bit of the lead up. Because yeah. Like this one, this is basically what we did, right? Like we kind of cropped this section off of it. And it just feels awkward. Leonardo Flavia, What about the sword horizontally? Putting the sword horizontally to break the vertical lines and get contrast. But how would you put the sword horizontally though? Like, because then it would need to be on the floor, and that just would be awkward, right? I think it's honestly, I get what you're saying, right? Because we have like a lot of verticality. Don't think it matters too much though, because you could make the argument opposite wise as well, right? Where you have like these horizontal lines and you have the staircase. And then this thing actually works pretty well at the moment. I think it's honestly not a big deal. I would probably not do it in that way, because then a pedestal, I mean, first of all, you're adding things to it, right? And that doesn't really make too much sense from what I know. Yeah. Yeah, no, but like the main concern that you have is that you have too many vertical lines, right? I honestly don't think that's going to be an issue if we pull the camera back, right? If we pull the camera back and we see more of the staircase, right? Yeah, sorry. No, Leonardo, it was an interesting suggestion. It's just sometimes I have to like think about stuff in my head as well, and like really try to go through the steps of like, okay, what would that mean if we do a pedestal? Pedestal maybe doesn't make sense, but some shrines do have like an altar where they can put stuff down, but maybe that's like a more modern thing rather than like a historical thing. That's what I'm thinking at that point, right? Yeah. I think it would be the case, right? If the sword was kind of blending in with the rest of the environment a little bit more, then we would have to look at how we could solve that. Okay, so. Yeah, but please feel free to chime in. I know sometimes that I'm quite like abrupt because I'm trying to think about stuff and then also trying to say things as well. So sorry about that. So number one, what we talked about was the lights, right? Like candle lights. So dimming them slightly. And then number two was careful. Gotta be careful about the frame edges, right? The cropping is important as well. But no, I think this is good. This is good. I like the couple of little fireflies as well. They look quite nice. I like the fog that you added too. Kind of gives it like a very moody kind of feel now. Really nicely done, Thomas. Yeah. You get a star. Great work. Okay. Nice one, Thomas. Yeah, like share it in. Oh wait. Oh well. Okay. I just want to bring this up, just to throw a little bit of contrast in here, right? To just showcase where we come from. Yeah. I mean, you know, just for contrast between the two, look at how good that looks. Looks great. Yeah, that improved like really nicely. Honestly, you can be proud of this one, Thomas. This looks awesome. All right. So that is Thomas. Can't wait until you post this one. It's gonna be good. Okay. So who do we have next? We have Typhon. Typhon 7. Okay. Welcome to the community, by the way. I see, yeah, you joined last year. Thanks so much for becoming a member. Okay. Let's have a look at your first Whip Wednesday then. There's a couple of questions in here which I like, so thank you so much for adding a bunch of questions. So the first one is the materials are not in final form, mostly placeholders, but I do think that the brick material is not doing justice for the details. I would love some advice on that. Okay, interesting one. So you kind of gave away the hint in the question, right? It's like the material is not finished, so you kind of have to trust the process and like go through the stages and like make sure that you kind of judge things wherever they are in the pipeline, right? And right now it's like pretty early, so it's kind of tricky to get like a good representation. What I also will say, let's make notes of that, right? So number one was about the materials. Don't judge them too soon. Because, yeah. Oh. Important. Iteration is a key word here. Because what we usually do is whenever we work on, especially the bigger projects, right? To keep our sanity in check, is we do everything in an iterative way. So we do like a base pass on everything first, right? And then we got the base pass done, then we do like an additional pass, and then we work our way towards like the polished pass at the end. And that's what you should do here as well, you know? Like this is like very early stages. So cool, that's done. You kind of gave it a quick UV map. Now move on to like the other sections of the church. Now to dive into like more details on this is it's very important for your materials to work in conjunction with your modeling, right? And what I mean by that is that if we look at the church itself, like a lot of it actually comes from the models. The model itself, like the actual let's see, is this the church over here? The same one? Oh, okay. Yeah, it is. Let's see. So you got the pillars there. Yeah, so you can see like this section, for example, right? Like a lot of it doesn't just come from like a basic material that's slapped on it, but it's detailed geometry, right? Plus your texture. And I think what's happening now in your case, because it's pretty early still in the stage, right? Like in the stage of your project, is that the model still has like a little bit to go, right? Like we're missing pillars, we're missing like all these arches, we're missing like all the interesting like little details on top of these pillars too. Oh yeah, these are the pillars, and then we got this stuff. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this top part still needs to be built in. Let's see. And also, you gotta be very careful with material separation too, right? So we have like this white material, and then we got like this copper or like lead material, like these lead roofings that are on the top of it as well, to separate them out too, right? And what is also working on the reference here is that you get like a lot of separation from just like the geometry itself, right? Where you have like a crevice, like the bricks are going to be darker compared to like some of the other areas. And this is all to say, like, don't judge it too soon. You just really need to take it through the paces, right? And like try to look at your reference and just try to build it up like iteratively. Yeah. Just keep it going. Keep it going. And then the last thing, right? Because you focus specifically on the brick material not doing justice for the details, is because you have a very strong contrast between your grout and the actual bricks themselves, right? And the base color is also like completely different as well. So try and get like the base color values closer to what they are in real life. Because right now what's happening is the visual that you have here, you're like, why doesn't this look like this? It's because we still need to like iterate on it, right? Like we need to tone down the base color. We need to change the contrast between like the bricks and like the stuff in between the bricks, and making sure that it kind of blends together better. Because what you have right now is probably, you can't really see the details because the material itself is super noisy, right? So you gotta really be careful about like visual noise. Right, so number 2. No matter what I did, I couldn't achieve that dense grass look. So what we got here is, it's super small though. I don't know if we have... I mean, it is really dense, right? I think it's actually too dense. It's kind of hard to see. It is super short, so like probably gonna take this back. But I don't think it's necessarily like about the density though. Because usually what makes grass feel really dense is just the length of it, right? So I think what you're going for, if you're going for a look like this, is more like a patchy grass, right? Where it's sort of maintained, but it's also like on rocky soil by the looks of it. So in that case, it's just about like more variations, right? Because right now, your grass is like pretty uniform. Like you wanna add like variation in the scale and the height of it too. Right, so that's the issue here. You're relying too much on like, well, it's hard to see, but like only a couple of variations of grass, right? Like it's pretty uniform. But honestly, I wouldn't care about that at this point. Like I would put all my focus and attention to like the main building and just leave the grass until like a later point, honestly. But yeah, get back to me for next week and talk to me about like what kind of grass you want to replicate, because if it is like that sort of like patchy grass that you have like in little reference here, like it just comes down to adding like more variations and then just the placement of those variations too. Yeah, the grass is definitely too uniform. And then number 3, I'm using a second UV workflow for these fences on with the material layering system, I think, MLS. And I would like some advice on breaking that repetitive look without creating like a bunch of DMIs. What are DMIs? Dedicated material instances? Dedicated material, I don't know. Breaking that repetitive look. Okay, so we're kind of talking about this fence, sorry. So if you want to break that repetitive look, then you need to do something on like a world basis, right? Yeah, that would be my suggestion. Some sort of like world-based like material variation where you have like your textures, right? Or like a layer on top of your assets that gets like that is different based on like where you place it in the world. Something like that could be a simple solution. Yeah. I mean, but honestly, like if you're... Yeah, but like if you're using like a second UV shader, right? And you have like additional layers that you layer on top of your base layer, then the really quick way is just create like more material instances. You only need like 2, right? You only need 2 because what you could do is you have like number 1 here. I'm talking about these modules, right? Like let's say all these modules. So you got number 1. If they're not symmetry, right? This could work. So you got number 1 here. Then you get number 1, but like 180 degrees, right? So you just rotate the model. Let me see, because a pole is probably attached to it too. Rotate the model and then scale it by -1. Right, and then you could like do number 2 here. Number 2 again. Number 3. Number 1. See what I'm saying? Like you just have to set up like 3 variations and then you can rotate them and scale them in different ways as well to get like even more variations too. But if you want to do it like more, so the first route would be like material instances, right? It's the easy way. And honestly, you only have to do it once. And it takes maybe 5 minutes, you know? You just change like a couple of parameters and then you got like material instances and you're done. That's definitely the easy way. Number 2 would be some sort of like world-based variation, right? Which is probably what you're looking for. You could kind of blend like a generic noise map on top of your vertex color maps, right? Or like, not your vertex color, but like your RGB masks, right? And then create like additional variation within that mask. That could be something to look into too. And then number 4 would be some advices on the composition and camera placement. Advice on the camera placement. I think something like this could work, right? Because you want to focus on like the big. So let's imagine that this is like your little island. I mean, it seems like you got the perfect reference here, right? Like something like this, where you can like rotate it around, right? Maybe do it in Marmoset. It doesn't need to be. But something from like the bottom, something from the top down as like a big overview, right? And then you could do just like screenshots like this, you know, where you have like detailed screenshots. You can make them like really artistic. But I'm gonna leave that up to you. Like, look at some references, look at some pictures of the buildings, and there's probably gonna be like enough inspiration there. Top down, like this guy, right? And then for the additional ones, just yeah. Get inspired by looking at people who have also taken pictures of the same building. It's gonna be great. I would honestly lock your main camera in as soon as possible. I feel like it's only the base color. Yeah, it could be. Well, no, it definitely has like normal as well because you can see the highlights and like the shadows, right? So there's definitely something happening there. But yeah. It could be only the base color in terms of like visual noise, right? Yeah. No. I wish you the best of luck, Tayfun. If you want to get some more feedback, reapply like the Whip Wednesday tag, right? On the actual building. On the actual building. On the post, sorry. No! We just finished up. Thanks for posting your work though. Appreciate it. And then we're gonna move on to McFell. McFell is in here. Okay, we're all good. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. No worries. No worries. So McFell, we're kind of talking about the same thing here, right? So I added like a couple of references here, like on the right, where like the current stone material that you have is like super intense. And it's like really noisy, right? So it would be, in your case, it would be like a little bit different, right? You're at the stage where you can create like variations. Yeah. Let's see. Wait, I actually have to look what what? Oh, Will is bringing that up as well. Like adding more variation to the texture. Yeah. So Yeah, texture variation is definitely like pretty simple one, right? What I would first try to figure out is what is a low noise. Do that first, because you already have like a pretty intense one, right? So you have like low noise first, and then the current one. Right, so you have that second, and then you start stacking up like maybe a variation if you need it. I think that's maybe what was happening here, but this doesn't really work because you see, I actually don't know why it's happening. Like you see like a lot of repetition here. Like this pattern is just like repeating over and over. But I don't know. McVal, I don't know if you're here in the chat. Is this vertex paint? The way that you set this up? I think you might have been here earlier, but yeah, we'll just have to make some assumptions here then. But yeah, I would definitely set that up in like a vertex paint, right? And then I think it is. I'm honestly just not sure why we have like all this repetition. Looks like the tiling is super duper high on the second material. I don't. It's a good suggestion though, Glenn, but I don't think it is. I think what might have been happening is that the texture itself just has like a lot of noise that is repeating like in a very small area, right? It almost looks like you take like a clone stamp in Photoshop and you kind of smear like an entire line out of it, like without changing the position. It's really weird. That's why I'm wondering where this is coming from. Yeah, I would definitely look at examples, right? That's why I added like a bunch of these, just to give you an indication of maybe it would be cool to go like a little bit more organic, right? Or maybe you just want to have like a bit more variation than you have now. So this would be like organic, and this would be like sort of what you have now, but I like that there's like more variation in like the spacing in the tiles and all that stuff. And then this is more like a cleaner one, right? Like a less noisy one, which you could potentially use as a template for your non-noisy version. Yeah. You have to definitely take care of like how noisy it is. That's like the main bit of feedback. I do like, however, that you're applying it to like the entire thing because it makes it really clear that it's something that you need to take care of. So yeah. Blanks are placeholder at the moment, and the color is quite gray. I honestly think that the color is too dark as well. If we look at like the colors from these guys, right, they don't feel too dark. Maybe even saturated as well. So, but definitely too dark though. Like, so take that into account. Like, again, I mean, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, right? But like, look at some references, right? Like, what are the sort of walls that you want to replicate? And kind of like, is it a thing that I do, right? And you probably did like some of the same stuff as well. I sample an image, right? I use my gradient map. I just go over like a section of the image. So for example, boop, I do this. Then I turn the gradient map all the way down, right? So that you get like less input, so that you remove the noise. And then after that, I push like an HSL node so that I can like tweak it closer to the actual image. That's what I do. Because when you sample like a section of a picture, right, you're never really gonna get like, it's never gonna translate from like a 2D image to like a 3D thing. So you have to tweak it a little bit as well. And also lighting is very important too, right? So make sure that your lighting is also set up correctly so that at least you're working in like good conditions. What was I saying? So the flow that I was talking about, right? So gradient map, sample image, and then I don't know what this step is called though. I'm kind of blanking on it right now. But there's like a slider at the bottom of whenever you sample like a section with your color picker that you can make it like less jittery. Yes. It's called reduce samples. And then put like an HSL. And then tweak it towards like what is a good value, right? Because what I'm also gathering from this, if this is Unreal, right? If your shadows are so dark, that usually means that you're missing a skylight. Which is going to have a huge impact on the way that your textures are going to look as well. So okay. Cool. That's going to be it, McVal. Best of luck. Thanks for posting your work again. Final 3. Let's go. Maria. Oh, sorry. Paula Maria. At present, I'm employing 2 different workflows with these modules. Oh, sorry. I didn't really give you like an introduction, right? But this shit looks great. I know that I say that every time, but I'm just loving the vibes of this. You know? This is an awesome project. So, currently I'm employing 2 different workflows for these modules. First, I use them to the first one is I use construct HUDs in Blender, assigning each HUD like a unique RGB mask. And the second one is where I assemble the HUDs in Unreal using a common RGB mask that I created from a modular set. However, the visual quality of the second workflow isn't as high, so I tend to use these HUDs more in the background. My main concerns are regarding the RGB mask and the overall visual results, and I would greatly appreciate some feedback. I think honestly, it's not a common workflow that you're doing here, right? Because you're kind of relying on the camera never moving, which is not really what happens in a realistic scenario in games, right? But there's nothing wrong with using these 2 workflows though. What I will say is with the first workflow, with the first one, right, where we're compiling buildings and then we add like an RGB mask. Let me think. So that's gonna be, you're gonna have like more textures, right? So number one is just more expensive because you're gonna have to make like an RGB mask for every new building you make. So you're making more textures overall. They generally also have to be higher res because you're trying to get like more you're trying to cover like more ground with it, right? Because you're doing a whole building instead of like modular pieces. So they have to be higher resolution to compensate as well, which is probably why they also look better. Because they can be more specific too. And then number two is optimized, right? Can potentially be lower resolution, but what you could do is you could then add like another noise mask or like another noise noise texture to it. You kind of push it up in resolution as well. So that could be a way to use like a lower res mask and make it look like it's actually higher res by blending it with like a higher res texture at the end. Let's see. You're set. So yeah. But like obviously less specific, right? Because you can't like select like certain areas that you want to color in. Right, so in this case, I would honestly go for number one. And just have it like a high resolution, make them all look really good. Because it's also, you're trying to aim for like better results, right? Like what your portfolio is trying to showcase is that you can showcase like a high quality level, right? So I would honestly go for number one in this case, with the caveat of bringing number two up, in that you tried number two. Whenever you're talking about your portfolio, whenever you're interviewing someone. No, we're getting into the weeds of things here, but so you could maybe add that in like a blog or something like that, right? I just want to make sure that you know that at a certain point you could, if it ever comes up, right? If you're talking about this project and they're like, oh, what are some of the things you tried? That you should bring that up, that you tried that, and that you know that that is probably like a more common thing to do. But that you know that you wanted to get like higher fidelity and that's why you chose this route. That's the way that I would play it. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like other ways around it. But I think honestly, like if number one already works, just keep doing that. Because this is also the thing. This is also the thing, right? Like there's never really like the best choice, right? Like usually we make choices that are like dependent on the projects that we do, right? So that's why I'm trying to think about like, okay, you're building this for your portfolio, you probably want to maximize for like quality rather than sacrificing it to be more optimal, right? That's the way that I would play it, right? Yeah, it's really interesting that you're doing these experiments though. Really interesting. That's what I like about the way that you're working, right? You very experimental with previous ones as well, with like the called again, like the large truck with like a giant arm on it. Very experimental, which is really good. Yeah, honestly, that's all I have to say on this. Hey, was there another question? Doo-doo-doo-doo. Oh. No, I think it's coming along nicely. I like all these things, you know? All these little buildings that you're making look really nice. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the materials and the texturing? I mean, they look good, right? It hasn't changed too much from when we saw it last time. And it looked really good back then as well. Like, that's one of the things that I really liked about the previous updates, right? Like the quality of the materials and the textures. The main thing that came into it is probably like the gradient now, right? Which is really nice. I think what you could do potentially, right, is where you have like the clear line. Probably make it like a little bit softer so that you have like a little bit more of a blend going on over a longer distance rather than it being so contrasted, right? But that's the main thing that I could say. Especially when you're using workflow 1, right? Where you have like you're dedicating like textures to it, right? Like now is the time to really make use of those textures and like really make it feel like there's like lots of variation, like lots of interesting things happening. And yeah. Try to also think about the interaction with the world, right? Like if things are like stacked against it or whatever. Because you have that space now, right? Because you're making these like maps for them anyway. Yep. That's cool. Really cool. Yeah, I made it more visual. Yeah, I can tell. Can tell. Great job. Yeah, look great. Again, with this building, right? It needs, in my mind, it needs like a little bit of an additional pass when it comes to like adding these sort of details to it, right? Because you kind of have like these things. And they kind of feel like it doesn't really make sense at the moment yet. Like it kind of needs like that layering, right? That you've been doing so well on like all these other ones. Where you can kind of feel that like one thing is going on top of the other one. And then maybe there's like some bindings holding it together or something, right? Like that level of polish that you've been putting into like all the other buildings, that needs to be applied on the big guy over here too. Yeah. Other than that, amazing stuff, Paula Maria. This is awesome. Can you do me a favor? Wait, maybe. Well, hold up. Okay, can you do me a favor? I'm really curious for the next update, right? If we can look at like not the complete scene, right? But like get a look at the overall scene now. I'm just curious how they all look together, you know? Looks pretty interesting. Yeah, this is awesome. I love this project. Thank you so much, Paula Maria. Looking forward to the next update, as always. Will do. Awesome. Okay, 2 left. Jacob. I think this is gonna be pretty short because I think Will on this one stole my thunder a little bit. And he was basically bringing up the same things that I was gonna bring up. And we've been talking about it so much today already, right? So we probably can keep it like a little bit shorter. Like the first thing that I want to bring up. It's definitely visual noise, right? Feels really noisy, especially when looking at this angle, right? Like, especially a lot of the foliage starts to like really blend together. And then the outline on some elements like adds like an additional layer of like noise on top of an already noisy scene. And it makes it really hard to kind of like separate things from each other. Yeah, and I feel like we're also kind of losing a little bit of like the color identity that was so strong in the beginning, right? Let's see. Yeah, for example, if we had to compare it with this guy, it's an unfair comparison, right? Because you're definitely further along in the pipeline. But you can tell that it lost something, right? By like adding so much noise, like something got lost along the way, in my opinion. And that is worth like exploring for yourself, right? Because this basically comes down to like what you want to achieve with this piece. I'm just gonna write here like a question that you should ask yourself, Jacob, is did we lose something? I know that this is kind of like a weird question to ask, right? But I tend to do this a lot when I take like frequent screenshots from my work. I tend to go back and I'm like, wait, this looks good. Like, what did I lose here? Like, what is the bit that I lost? And maybe I can pull that back into the current work that I'm doing. And I think, honestly, what we kind of lost comparatively is the visual clarity, right? Like how clearly defined some of the areas were. Now, obviously, we have to take into account that this was like an untextured scene and it was like pretty basic colors on it, right? And there is some iteration there as well. But yeah, I would really try to condense some of these areas. And yeah, pick out areas where you can... For example, I would probably like reduce all the background noise here. And I think maybe this was like a suggestion as well from Will. Yeah, like a hierarchy of sizes. Yeah, that's an awesome suggestion, Will. So that you could like potentially scale some of these guys up. Right? So that we have like bigger shapes that we can look at. And make them like... They don't have to be like too big, right? But you can like scale them up. That would be like really good as well. I'm just gonna write like a couple of keywords here, right? Because this basically comes down to like your choice. Because even all this stuff, right? You could be like, no, this is kind of my vision. This is what I want to do with it too, right? So that's why I asked this question in this way, because I don't want to say that you definitely lost something along the way. Maybe this was like a very deliberate progression of like, yeah, I kind of like this like noise. I kind of like what I'm doing here. Maybe that's like your style that you want to go for, right? And I don't want to destroy that either. But I would just do like yeah, like a sort of like what do you call it? Like an audit? An audit on like, okay, the scale and proportions. Like, are they good? Like, is it clear? Like, do I want it to be clear? I was just looking at some of the older screenshots and comparing. I think there's a compromise to be found. Yeah, but like I said, right? Like, this is totally up to you, Jacob. Totally agree about the scale? Okay, yeah. Yeah, because I think Will made like a really good suggestion with that. I like that. I didn't even think about like the scale of things, but that could definitely help. And like I think that's like a really good compromise in the stage of your project, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily need to destroy something. You just scale something up slightly, and it can already have like a drastic impact. I think honestly that could be like a really good exercise for you at this point. Play around with it. Right? Just take a couple of assets, like take these assets that are like where you want people to be looking, right? Or that are like important to convey in the story. Like scale them up and see if you can put them in like different compositions and like different mini compositions, right? I'm not talking about changing the whole thing, but like playing around with like the scales and like rotations of things within those spaces. Yeah. You know, I think Will brought up some really good points. So big shout out to Will here. Thanks, Will. Yeah, I think honestly, I also pulled this screenshot up because I don't know what it looks like without the black outline, right? But it does definitely add like this additional noise that wasn't really present before. But then again, I'm also assuming, making an assumption here, right? Like that is something that is needed to distinguish certain color groups from each other, right? Because let's say if you don't have the black outline, then stuff will be blending together like a lot more than it does now. So I can also see that like the black outline was like a solution to a problem that was there before, and that maybe that I'm not seeing, right? Yeah. No. Still a great scene though. I think once you like reduce the clutter, especially the foliage, right? I think the foliage here is like the biggest issue. If you like clear that up, I think you're good. Going down the edges, the outlines. Yeah. Because foliage is noise at this point. But yeah. No, man, I'm still really excited about this, right? Because there's like, it feels very unique, and it feels like you're putting your heart and your soul into it, and like you're trying stuff out. Like it's very experimental, and that's really exciting to see. Especially from like fellow artists, right? When they're like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm just gonna bash stuff together and then like recalculate, and it's cool, man. It's cool. I really like it. Very experimental, very unique. So that's why I'm trying to be like really careful with this, right? Because I don't want to destroy your motivation to go after something unique, right? Because sometimes you just gotta be like, nah, this is what I wanted to do. If other people don't like it, then, well, I do. So who cares? Leonardo is saying maybe the noise is just because of the distance. This looks a good style up close. Yeah. See, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because I would say that it still looks noisy up close. But this is also coming from like a person who, for context, doesn't really like the Borderlands style, right? Which is something that I'm grasping towards now as like a relevancy thing. So this is why I'm trying to be like really careful, right? Again. Because I think, oh, this is so tricky, right? This is actually like a really interesting thought to have. Like, I would say that like you experimenting with like your own visual style, and like even if it is really noisy, is more important than trying to make something that is like cookie cutter AAA, for example. depending on what you aim for, of course. But yeah, no, yeah, no, Jacob. So like, I'm curious what you're gonna see, right? I'm 100% confident that if you say that you lost something along the way, that you're gonna find like a really interesting solution to it. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, last one for today, because we're running a little bit over, is from Tate Bitters. Oh, Jacob is giving feedback on this one. Thanks so much, Jacob. Appreciate that. My first outdoor environment. The goal of the project is to get better at sculpting and foliage. Hoping to get some feedback on the composition. I think the composition is really nice already, right? Like an early stage. I think if you could make it work, I mean, you definitely can. You definitely can. I already know a way we can do that. The thing that I like about like your image, which is like sick image as well, by the way, is that like the statue inside of it. Oh. No. Is that the statue inside of it could be interesting if we light that up a little bit. So what I'm imagining is just like a little spotlight where we just like bake light up like the interior of the temple, right? So that the focus becomes like this main statue over here. This becomes the focal point, right? But that's the only thing. I think overall, like you already like carving out like the sun here is like a very good start, right? There's a lot that you can do with like the foreground here as well. This could be really interesting to play around with. Yeah. Focal point on the statue, right? With like more light. Lighting it up. Love some lighting advice. Oh, we kind of did that already, right? Like I think having a solid base with like your stereotypical directional light and all that kind of stuff. And then for a scene like this where you want like specific control, I would just go in with like little spotlights and like light it up, you know? Yeah, the base is already really strong, right? Got a strong base. I've never worked with outdoor lighting before, and I don't have much knowledge on what looks good and what doesn't. Well, this is going to be more of an experiment then, right? I think honestly, like the way that you set it up right now already looks pretty good as a start, right? And I'm going to trust you on this one, honestly, because from what I can tell, like the previous pieces that you've done came out really well, especially when it comes to the lighting department too. So yeah, just have to trust yourself, right? Like, I mean, you're gonna have to deal with like a skylight and a directional light and all that kind of stuff, but I would like do the finishing tweaks or like specific things with like just spotlights, like you normally would, right? So don't overthink it. Let's see, and Jacob is saying, composition-wise, pay more attention to the reference painting. Those slanted trees. Those slanted trees could be really cool. They're gonna be tricky though. But they do like a really good job, right? Like we're kind of replicating the same feel, just without like the slanted trees. Because we kind of have like this funnel, right? Kind of like a very interesting composition looking at it now. But I think the weird thing here is that that also works because this painting is more vertical than it is landscape. And even though we're kind of replicating it, right? Like we have like a huge dead zone over here. Not that it's an issue, right? But yeah, I think, I mean, I hate doing portrait renders myself. Like this could be a case where it could potentially work better. Might be playing around with, right? Like might be worth playing around with. That's all I'm saying. Portrait mode? All right. Yeah, but very interesting reference. What I would definitely try to replicate from this is how the blues and the greens all interact together. Something really, really interesting happening here. All right, cool. I'm honestly just gonna leave this here because, yeah, pretty short and sweet. You got some interesting reference here, and I honestly don't think you're gonna struggle that much with like the outdoor lighting. It doesn't change too much from what you're used to, and you can always use like your previous lighting techniques as like a backup too, right? And then I would experiment with like a little bit of like a portrait trial. Don't know if that's going to be effective, but it's always worth a try, right? You can always play around with it. Yeah. And like try to look into like replicating the colors because the colors are so interesting. Which is honestly probably going to be like a more trickier thing to do. Yeah. Definitely worth it though. Right, Tate. I know this was like short and sweet. I know we're running over time as well, so I'm gonna keep the outro short as well. I just want to thank everyone for sharing their work as always. This was what is it, like 12 people that we did today? I think this might be like the most busiest session that we've had. But I appreciate everyone for sharing their work. So what happens next is that I'll probably post the overpaints and like all the feedback into everyone's channel. I'm going to remove the tag as well, and then whenever you're ready to get like another review, feel free to throw the Whip Wednesday tag back up, and then I'll have another look at it again. Yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for pitching in with some good ideas as well. And also a big shout out to people that were helping other people in the community as well. Like Jacob and Will and some other people as well. Thank you so much for helping out because that's huge. All right, people, I'm gonna go. Wish you a nice evening, and we'll see each other soon.